Hey folks, welcome to yet another episode of Business Redefined, your weekly, most comprehensive look at the world of business, finance, and economics. Now, between the 7th and 8th of September, the entire continent will be converging in Nairobi for the Africa Capital Week, where we'll be having conversations about capital markets, the role for crowding in capital coming into this country and into the continent, and how that plays within the larger macroeconomic agenda for the country, for the region, and for the continent. And to help us build up to this and make sense of what this is all about, we are privileged to have Dr. Nzai, the chairman of the delivery board of Vision 2030, but also front and center as far as the plans for this Capital Week are concerned. Daktari, karibu sana.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Wonderful. Karibu sana. Maybe for those who might not be familiar, why the Africa Capital Week? Why Nairobi?
Thank you. So the Africa Capital Week is a convening of Africa's securities exchange or capital markets ecosystem across Africa. So that convening, we're looking at 500 players, industry players across Africa, regulators, private equity, venture capitalists, and more important, the securities exchanges. Those are mostly regulators and the capital owners. And then we're also bringing some of the key projects, transformational projects, which are happening across the continent, which require capital, for us to have a conversation. Why? From the Vision 2030 side, which I chair, deepening of capital markets was one flagship project, which was the facilitator. We needed to deepen capital market to raise capital for public-private partnership for us to be able to finance the Vision 2030 projects for them to be implemented. Today, as we are looking at the end of 2030, Vision 2030, and looking at beyond, it still becomes the most resilient or the most important flagship project which we must propel, not only for Kenya, but for the continent. So that's number one. Number two, Kenya today and its performance from both policy framework in the financial services sector and more important again, the capital markets space, and especially the deepening of capital markets, we've made quite some progress, both from reform side in terms of the legal policy and institutional frameworks with the Capital Markets Authority, the Nairobi Securities Exchanges, to the performance that it is. And then Africa is really looking up to us to be able to do this because of the progress that we have made. So out of conversations which we carried with the Vision 2030 at the margins of the UN General Assembly last year, and conversations with Wall Street, conversation with now really the global financial architecture leaders, every time what were kind of coming around was like, look, yes, Africa needs this capital, but you're too fragmented, small markets, small securities exchanges. It would be good for you to somehow be aligned so that we can speak as one, dual listings and harmonize kind of processes so that it can be more of a trusted system. So we are setting this up for us to have a conversation on policy, to have a conversation on the pipelines which are valuable, to have conversation on credibility. So through the whole of that conversation in the 2 days, we want to simply have a discussion, but with very, very clear results. At least can the regulators agree on some certain things that they need to do harmonized between now and 2030. We actually just put in a timeline between now and 2030. Can the Securities Exchange agree on certain things, maybe dual listing or cooperation at that level so that they can begin to, they themselves effect this conversation about shifts in the global financial architecture, which we have. So I think the fourth, as you well know, our president is the African Union champion for institutional reforms. And he's been the biggest voice on this financial architecture. You may remember the Africa Forward. The reason we hosted Africa Forward was to have that conversation in an open way. You know, so Kenya took a huge risk to do that because it was not the most popular. But out of that conversation, I think there's some results. So we want to take this forward from the Africa Capital Week in Nairobi. And then from there, we take that conversation as Africa at the margins of the UN General Assembly.
Which comes later.
Which comes later. On the 21st, we have the Kenya is Open for Business Forum, where we will have much of the same conversations, but really invite the whole of Africa, the whole of the globe, for us to have that conversation.
But tell me, Doc, many of my friends, when I speak to them, those who are seated in New York, London, Zurich, etc., they will tell you, we have the capital, but we struggle with bankable projects in markets like Nairobi, Lagos, Johannesburg. Do you see those bankable projects here, Doc?
Look, a bankable project, what's a bankable project? Everyone or an institutional investor, an investment banker will have different definitions. The fact of the matter is we know, let's take a look at the current investments which are there, those so-called bankable projects which have been banked, invested, and the yields on them, okay? The yields are very, very high. And you just look at the Nairobi Securities Exchanges, how it has performed. Those are companies based on bankable projects which are there. So the meeting point, and this is why we want to do this, because the government of Kenya and African governments, I think, we have done so much, I think, to package enough projects. Talk about the lake of Kenyan and geothermal. It's very, very clear that we have geothermal power, right?
And it's very bankable.
And it's very, very bankable, right? So we need the investors to come, because that's a function of expertise and it's a function of capital. We need to have a meeting point. And this is what we are trying to do now, that the regular conversation about bankability, public-private partnership, has had its challenges because of those narratives. Now, when we come and have a conversation that we have now a stronger institutional framework of de-risking these projects, preparation of these projects, as a matter of fact, we have the like of the Kenya Development Corporation, which does that right now in Kenya. Many countries also, Ethiopia has the like of the Ethiopia Development Corporation, which is doing the larger airport, it's financing that. The Nairobi Securities Exchanges, which has deepened with the like of the Center of Excellence in terms of supporting MSMEs to prepare them to exit. The Ibuka program, which is kind of at the lowest level. So that is all about preparing project for bankability, okay? And it's a place where you're meeting the investor out there and the project sponsor to have this conversation. So I think all said, if this conversation comes from the angle where you are looking at it from the exit point of view, it is de-risked. It's an easier conversation to have where an investor will say, okay, great. You have a feasibility or pre-feasibility. It's not right there. But in my own formula of definition of bankability, I'll work with you to move it to this level with the Securities Exchange as an exit point. I think that's what government should do to simply bring in the enabling environment, put in the support system to get there. And I think most of African governments today, I think they have done well. Kenya, we have done well for us to bring those projects to that level where they are ready for investors to come in, put in their input, and also de-risked enough for them also to have an exit point with the capital markets.
Doc, you and I know that one of the struggles we have as far as capital markets in this side of the world are concerned is the fact that we have huge domestic capital pools which are all locked in government securities. If you look at our pension funds, they're sitting on 2.8 trillion shillings, 60% in government paper. How do we begin to unlock it from there? Because as you've spoken, there are vast opportunities out here.
Well, a true example, the Kenya Pipeline. The Kenya Pipeline, a GOE, a government-owned enterprise, has been there seated for many years, and that's just an example. We have a list of them, like Kenya Pipeline right now, who are on track. To the extent we have created a whole state department of public finance and assets. The public-private partnership director, PPP, has been strengthened. The capital markets have been strengthened. So we have known the problem. And that is why we have set up those systems for most of these institutions now to be able to exit or list in the Nairobi Securities Exchange. What does that mean? The Kenya pipeline, who are the most investors? To the pension funds, the funds. So we needed to create a system, a structure, where they're comfortable for them to do that within their own parameters of investments. So I think what it means is that is testimony that the government has listened to these pension funds in their discipline of management, that they can do this. Because the trends now, as you correctly said, they are investing away or some other places, not domestically, largely so. So I think this is why we actually want to have this conversation. So there's a whole session which will talk about the funds, pension funds, sovereign wealth fund. That's happening on the 8th.
Yes.
For us to kind of unpack this conversation and test it out. Is this the right way? What are the trends across Africa, and what has the global space done in kind of similar challenges that they have had over years?
Doc, a number of our viewers are what we would like to call retail investors. When they listen to us so far, they would think that sounds like a conversation for institutional investors only. What is the place of retail investors within the Africa Capital Week? How will they be factored into the conversation?
Well, the retail investors who are coming in right now, there is two places. There's a whole session on micro, small, medium enterprises, which we are very, very glad our very, very strong State Department for Micro, Small, Medium Enterprise with some of the very innovative vehicles we come up with. The Hustler Fund, okay? The Nyota Fund, the Economic Jobs and Economic Transformation Fund. Okay?
They're very catalytic.
Very, very catalytic. So that is a whole space of the micro, small, medium enterprises in Kenya who are participating. You've not even gone to the regular commercial banks and some of the instruments which are there, which have been reaching out to that level. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is with our friends, the Kenya, my friend Willie of the Investment Banks Association, the advisors, the brokers who are there. The whole of that space who are controlling much of the regular Kenyans or investors in the stock market. Those will be represented there. So I think that was very, very deliberate to make sure that across the ecosystem, we have all levels, okay? The institutional investors, correct, the big projects that are like the Nairobi Railway City, the Nairobi Metropolitan, the LAPSET, the like of, the Konza Technopolis, those are kind of high-end, which require the institutional investors. But at this level also, we are bringing the MSMEs and also some of the investors, the like of IFC World Bank, the like of European Reconstruction Bank, the commercial banks themselves. So they will behave in that. And again, this is not just a Kenyan conversation. So far, I think as of yesterday, we're looking at 12 countries who have confirmed. We're looking to get that target of 20 countries who will come and share for us to be able to learn, for us to be able to exchange.
Okay. Let's tie up capital and capital markets with the broader macro policy. And I think this is where your Heart of Vision 2030 now comes in. Help us understand the nexus between these two.
Well, the nexus, you see, Vision 2030, that economic pillar, we've always, we had the goal target of 10% GDP growth. We've fallen short of that. We have 4.5% thereabouts. You look at the whole, where were the hits, where were the misses. A good bit of it is that deepening of capital markets and that space, to the extent there is evidence of it. More than 18 years, we had not listed at the Nairobi Securities Exchange.
A single IPO.
Why? So that's a genuine question we need to ask. And the result of that is that nexus of that policy that you are talking about. So we think right now, so that's one aspect of the catalytic space of the capital markets into the economy, especially the micro, small, medium enterprises where they could be supported to be able to move. The other one is what you just said, if we have pension funds, if we have high net worth individuals in Africa who are not investing here, there's a reason they're not doing that. And I think we've listened. We think within the capital markets, if we open up that nicely, they will be able to easily be able to do that. Diaspora, some of the funds that they have remittances, that's one aspect you can take a look at it. But in diaspora, Kenyans in diaspora and Africans in diaspora, how much money do they invest in NASDAQ and Wall Street today compared to what they remit? Why is it that they're not buying the stocks here? Okay, is that a conversation for us to have?
Yeah.
So
many will tell you our markets are not liquid enough. So when they want to exit,
exactly. So that's a conversation, and it's a very valid conversation, very candid, which is what we want to have.
Yeah.
I think the other point on that nexus that you are talking about now then is Kenya is a lower middle income country now. Okay, beyond 2030, we are looking to go high income. In that conversation with the greater economist, my good friend Professor Hino talked about the middle income trap.
yeah,
For us to assail that and be able to manage that space, we need to open up that window where the Vision 2030 projects between now and 2030 and beyond, we get some alternative fundings. We get some of these innovative funding through the capital market. So we've seen this to be a very, I think, strategic area, which we've worked on for years for us to strengthen and be able to tap on it, especially now. It is not a choice, we need it. And then I think lastly, it's really if we're going to talk about changing the global financial architecture, it begins with our economy here. Let's fix our financial architecture, the structure, the system first in our country, and other countries, let them be influenced. Let's exchange on how we fix them at the country. Then we can talk about it probably in another 20 years and say, we actually got it done. So I think that's the nexus on that 3 dimension that you're talking about.
Doc, many analysts looking at our market always tell me that Kenya does a fantastic job in product development. You have ETFs, you have derivatives, but the products are not aligned with the market needs. The average Kenyan will tell you, I just want to be able to trade my SACCO shares. When you tell me about derivatives and ETFs, how do we address this at the Africa Capital Week? How do we speak about product development vis-a-vis market needs? Now,
one of the outcomes of this conversation is for us to have some sort of a Nairobi declaration, binding commitments, where this very honest, candid conversation, because we now have stated the problem and we know what the solution is.
And we know the problems.
Yeah? The government wants it. Research shows that this is the way to go. This is how other countries and other people have done it. It works. That's research, and you could call it academia. And then industry also now is calling for it.
Yeah.
The citizen is calling for it. So again, we want to move this from a positive point, again with that evidence that it took 18 years for us to do this, to list. How has Nigeria performed? How has Ghana? How have other countries performed? Those instruments that you are talking about, which have kind of been stuck, the idea now is to unstick them in the sense through this. What is it that what's industry asking of government to make sure that they move from this policy pronouncement to action? So we want to call on that action. And the idea from this conversation then, whatever commitments or declarations are done, we present them to the President of Kenya, who in his capacity as the African Union champion for institutional reforms, and he can advance it as a president. And if any other president comes, then we'll do that. The same of that conversation, then also we take it to New York, where we can have that conversation and keep on doing it. Because if we do that, then it means it's industry talking with government to solve the problem which they have agreed upon.
Okay. Doc, many investors raise the question around, we like the environment that Kenya offers, but policy predictability is the headache. This year you have a policy, next year it is being revised, and there is no certainty. Even if I deployed my capital, my risk metrics begin to change as we progress over the years. What guarantee can we give, and how much spotlight do you intend to give this issue of policy predictability at the Capital Week?
Well, that's somewhat an oxymoron in a way, because today in Africa or across the globe, can you predict the U.S. government policy?
Today we can't.
You can't, okay? Kenya, I think, with all honesty, the Kenya Vision 2030, launched in 2008, the Kenya Constitution, 2010, those two tracks, and then with the human capital, which is equal industry, you look at it that in that three dimension, we're predictable, you know? We're predictable because they dance. And that is, that we have that, you know, that's what's going on for us. To the extent as we are speaking right now, I'm seated as a chairman of Vision 2030. We have just launched the process now, or public participation of what the past, the present, the hits and the misses of the Vision 2030, with a view for us to do a medium-term plan, which is the transitional from 2028 to 2032, because the one that we have now is ending on 2028 in June. Okay, so from July 2028, we need a new plan, which is 5-year, and that becomes also a foundation, a baseline for the new plan, which we call it now the Kenya at 100, from 1963 to 2063, the centennial, that's 100 years of Kenya since independence. Can we plan that? Why? It's because the Vision 2030 has been a predictive platform of the Kenyan policy framework. Everyone knows we have a long-term vision. We've had 2 presidents coming in, and all of them have moved into the wheel of the Vision 2030 to complete the programs, the projects which are there. LabSet was launched by, in the first medium-term plan 2008 by President Kibaki, and he started a whole list of projects. When the president came, he took the SGR project from Mombasa to Nairobi, and he completed it. Nairobi Railway City was a flagship project from then. What happened? Slow, of course, but now it's right in the midst. The planning of that began a long time ago. The Dongokundu Special Economic Zone, every president has had to pick it up. The LAPSET. So name them, that is consistency.
There's continuity.
There's continuity. And it's not just hot air, it is true, it's happening. You know, why? We do not have a choice. We do not have a choice but to do that. We are lower middle income country. We need the economic sovereignty of our country. And we're thinking for ourselves, we're looking at the resources that we have, we're looking at the competitive advantage. And that's why, with all honesty, the president today, when he speaks out there to the world, he speaks it for Kenya, he speaks it for Africa, because should Kenya succeed, then Africa gets also to succeed.
Doc, my final question, because our time is fast spent. What's your action call as we look towards 7th and 8th? What would you tell Kenyans to expect and to participate in that?
What Kenyans expect is, one, for us to have a true conversation of the opportunities we have for our socioeconomic development through creation of wealth, through the capital markets, for the private sector and the industry. Local and international in the global space. There is an opportunity to invest in a very credible way right now within the Kenyan framework. Our Capital Markets Authority, as a regulator, has strengthened its system. The State Department Treasury for public finance and assets is strengthening all that, and the Nairobi Securities Exchange. So this conversation is to happen very, very openly, but to also get some comparisons from the other countries of how they have been successful. The end goal of it is some binding commitments which both industry, government will get to make to see how we move forward. We listen in terms of the challenges which are there from industry and the policymakers, so that we can be able to now move forward. And I think this then will be the beginning of the shift in this conversation of the global financial architecture, beginning with our country.
We've been having a conversation with Dr. Nzai ahead of the Africa Capital Week taking place on the 7th and 8th of September right here in Nairobi. And he has given us some insight into what we can expect, what kind of action points we anticipate from that, and what sort of roadmap will be put in place for execution. Because trust me, this will not just be another talk shop. We are here to ensure that Africa's capital markets work for this continent. Keep it Business Redefined.